All right, welcome everybody today to our presentation of growing and sustaining a strong special education workforce. Our presenter today is Lucky Mason Williams, and she is also a member of the Southern Tier Special Ed Task Force. And I'm going to turn it right over to you because we've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, sounds good. So again, welcome. I have been a member of this task force for a number of years. I've lost count. And we definitely do these events every couple of months, usually about 6 per year, I would say 4 to 6, and definitely encourage you to come back. We do a variety of topics, and we try to share pretty broadly topics that are relevant, hopefully for families, as well as teachers and administrators, related service providers, but all focused on supporting kids with disabilities within schools. Really excited to see so many familiar faces. Hopefully that will help me to not feel as nervous. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Loretta Mason Williams. I'm an associate professor at Binghamton University. I go by the nickname Lucky, so please feel free to call me that. I've worked at Binghamton for about 12 years. Before that, I was at a smaller university in Wisconsin. Before that, I taught middle school. So I was a middle school special ed teacher, primarily teaching, co-taught type of classrooms, along with a few self-contained rooms. But my doctoral work and my research over the past 12 years has
Looks
really
like we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. 1 second here. Okay, can you, it's our internet connection, so just 1 second. Okay, we're good. Thank you. Sorry about that, Lucky.
No problem. We have a dissertation defense happening like 2 doors down, and they're also having internet problems. So it may be me. Just let me know if I need to do anything. Rainy day. But for the past 15 or 20 years or so, I've been really focused on the special ed workforce. And that's where my research has really focused on, as well as doing a lot with preparation of pre-service and in-service teachers around supporting kids with disabilities. I'm also currently the director of our doctoral program in community research and action at Binghamton University, a highly interdisciplinary doctoral program. And if you ever have any questions about that, feel free to reach out. Let's see. Okay. So what I hope to do today in the short amount of time, and it is a short amount of time, I could probably spend days talking to all of you about this, is to tell you a little bit about what we know from research about the workforce, things that you're probably feeling and seeing already. But much of the work we have is from a national focus, and so share a little bit about that and how we've been thinking about it. But then also to really focus on the special ed teachers, because that's where much of the work has been done, but to also occasionally try to input. I know there are people who mentioned wanting to focus on early childhood. I agree that it's the early childhood teachers is a huge area of need, both for research and for emphasis in policy and practice, as well as our related service providers. So I don't have a whole lot of information about those fields. However, I do recognize that that is a huge challenge, and some of the information or some of the research we're finding, I think, can translate into those fields. So I'll also try to provide a lot of resources around this. But to do this, I'm going to share what we know about the composition, distribution, stability, and effectiveness of the special educator workforce. It's a field that's been referred to over the past 50 to even 100 years as a severe, chronic, and pervasive problem. That I worked on a chapter recently where I was citing things from the early 1900s around the challenges of supporting students with disabilities included in classrooms, and the need for more teachers to be prepared and ready to provide access to education to students with disabilities. So not a new problem, and yet, still a really challenging problem. So the other thing I'd like to focus on to some extent is what we might think about. Sorry, my slides are in different places. Okay. What are some of the potentially useful practices that we can implement in our schools, within our district, that might actually be helpful to support the teachers we have and to grow the special ed workforce. So hopefully you'll find it useful. So in terms of the composition, this is where most of my research has focused, really describing the composition of special ed teachers from a national perspective. My work and the work of my colleagues has demonstrated that in addition to shortages, often schools are forced to rely on individuals who lack preparation in special education, such as someone with an elementary certification or someone from outside of education entirely. Recent investigations have supported that there have been increases in the supply and that there are more special ed teachers with greater content expertise. They're more likely to have a dual certification. So these are good steps forward. However, the shortages are clearly a persistent problem. And that there appears to be some real, giving away the next couple slides, the real distributional issues. And they're due, the special ed composition, these shortages in special education are greater than in any of the other fields. We have more substantial shortages in special education than we do in science and math, English language learner, teachers of English language learners, that this is an even bigger problem in our field. An additional challenge relates to the limited number of special ed teachers of color. Although more than half of students with disabilities are students of color, more than 80% of special ed teachers are white. This is problematic, as there's really an emerging strong research body of evidence that supports that Black teachers or teachers of other minoritized groups can really make a significant difference in the academic achievement of students of color. That when a Black student is assigned to a Black teacher, that those students do achieve more. We also find that there's some spillover effect where a school that is able to hire and retain a Black teacher of color, that they are able to help their white teacher colleagues to help their students make greater gains. So this compositional issue of not enough teachers of diverse backgrounds is really a challenge currently. As I was mentioning, and distribution is really a problem. And this is part of my, what is really at the core of my research, that all students with disabilities in all schools and all places really should have access to a well-qualified teacher. And so there's a lot of evidence that that's a problem, that high schools that are whiter, more affluent, they are more likely to have the better qualified teachers. Some evidence that distribution is improving, but still a major area of concern. The other challenge is that this distribution appears to be problematic, not only between districts, but also within a district, if you have like multiple elementary schools, as well as within a school building, that we are distributing our better qualified teachers into our classrooms with higher achieving, more white, more affluent students. And that we can measure these assignment practices in lots of different ways. And so again, another challenge that has a considerable role potentially in explaining some of our achievement gaps. But focusing specifically on special education, the inequitable distribution of special ed teachers contributes to students with disabilities in high poverty schools and in special education or alternative schools to be more likely to be taught by teachers who lack content expertise, which potentially further contributes to academic achievement gaps. In terms of stability, this is another way that we're looking at our special ed teacher workforce. We lose approximately 15% of special ed teacher supply to turnover. And an additional 8% are moving into general education classrooms, which could be good if we're thinking about, okay, it's a person who has special ed training and background, and now they're going to be in a classroom that includes students with disabilities. That could be a good thing in terms of their teaching practices and their ability to help students with disabilities. But it's a really challenging problem when we're trying to fill positions. And so trying to understand how this attrition can impact the workforce and what we can do differently to try to hold on to our special ed teachers. We know that this is a problem that is more prevalent in special education, again, than any of the other fields. All fields lose teachers every year, right? We have teachers that sometimes we want to have leave the workforce, but in special education, this is a bigger problem than in those other areas. And something that I know my colleagues and I are starting to think about more is how quickly we're moving special ed teachers up some of the administrative chains. And what that, like that's a good thing, but that also then leaves an opening behind. And what are some of those implications? Effectiveness. This is something that my friend Allie Gilmore, who was at Temple and is now working for American Institute for Research, she's really been emphasizing this in the work that she's been doing. That according to many, like our measures using things like our Regents tests, that special ed teachers have been insufficiently effective at promoting positive academic achievement gains. Dual certified teachers appear to help students with disabilities achieve more, but a special ed only certified teacher may not be as effective in terms of our measurable academic achievement measures. Lots of reasons why that should be taken with a huge grain of salt, but it is something to be aware of. And part of the question though, is it that the preparation, which may or may not include content preparation, is that the impact on student gains, or is it the working conditions in which some of the special ed teachers are under, or in the classrooms that students with disabilities are placed in? Is that causing the insufficient effectiveness? We also know that our special ed teachers don't often measure as effective on some of our observational tools. There's a real mismatch in some of the observation tools that teachers that administrators are using within schools, things like the Danielson framework. That doesn't do a great job of evaluating best practices for special ed teachers. So we know that students with disabilities benefit from direct instructional practices. And the Danielson framework actually doesn't do a great job of rewarding that type of practice. So, and now a special ed teacher who may want to improve and is looking at their skills from this type of observational framework, they may get frustrated. It may not, provide them with the feedback that they need to improve within a best practice framework. And so there's some implications around that my friend Nate Jones is really trying to think about, as well as others. And it's unclear, like, how do we use these statewide accountability systems within the framework of special education? Should we be thinking about math scores and reading scores, or are there other ways that we can think about effectiveness? The other challenge is that special ed teachers don't often feel as effective, and that has some real long-term implications as well. If I don't feel effective, what does that look like in my classroom and with my students? Okay. So what are some of the current conditions that might be driving shortages and attrition? I went on Facebook. I'm part of a Facebook special ed teachers group, and that's everybody's greatest source of information, Facebook. But I just pulled a couple of the comments that people were posting about their role as a special ed teacher. And it really, like, those posts are really what we're seeing in a lot of the research about what the conditions are for a special ed teacher that may not make them feel as effective, or may not make them want to stay in the classroom. So the first one, the complicated roles that we ask special ed teachers to play. So the top one, how many of you stay beyond your contracted hours? So the discussion around that was fascinating, of teachers going back and forth, how you can't stay after. Some say, I knew this couldn't be a 9-to-5 job, but how the amount of the work overload that some special ed teachers feel like they're under, those pressures, that they're managing cases, they're working with families, they're collaborating with a whole host of other general ed teachers and paraprofessionals. They have their duties and responsibilities that other teachers have, of attendance and cafeteria duty. And the list goes on and on. And so these complicated roles, and then sometimes they're teaching multiple content areas, but the list goes on, and that can be a challenge related to the shortage and the attrition rates. The one below I find really interesting, and something that I don't think we're spending enough time on in some of these research, the difference in a rural school. So this is a special ed teacher who's the special ed teacher for the entire district. And how do you manage getting to different classrooms and the content when you are the teacher? And I think that also relates to challenge number 2. Some of the feelings of not being supported. And, and again, this is Facebook, so, or not feeling like you're part of the team. I still feel like I'm excluded. Special ed teachers often report that they don't feel like they are part of the school team. Whether it's because they're a BOCES classroom within a general education school and this kind of wall between that classroom and the rest of the building, or if it's, these feelings of, well, the special ed teams, they go over here and the math team goes over here, some of these feelings of not being a part of the school team. And then some of these, the limited feelings of limited support. And again, like just pulling these from Facebook, there's probably lots more to this post than I am aware of, but the teacher is going, like, I've been wanting to talk to administrators about the student who's really challenging. And instead of helping me to problem solve, they're telling me that they're trying to get me to leave. I'm sure there's a ton more to that story than we get from that Facebook post. I get that. But oftentimes the research is showing that administrators don't necessarily know how to support special ed teachers, that they have never been a special ed teacher. They're not aware of all the additional constraints, or they're not aware of the pressures. Similarly, colleagues don't, you've only got 4 students, how hard can it be? And not understanding some of those other pressures. So, and then all of it is very contextualized and very much based on where you are and the people that are surrounding you and the feelings of the school building, these systemic type of issues. It's complex, it's multifaceted, it's multi-layered, but I do think there are some things, some very not simple is the wrong word, some concrete ideas that we could reflect upon that may be appropriate in your situation. And some things that I'm going to share that may not apply or you may already be doing. And just know that I recognize how hard everybody works and that some of these things are going to be redundant with what you already do, but for somebody else, it may be something that you hadn't thought of. So one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is some of the opportunities we have in our schools before we even think about them entering into higher education and becoming a special ed teacher. Connections and awareness matters. I was just talking with a bunch of sophomores at our university and talking to them about their majors. And it came up that when I was 18 and going to major in whatever, a bunch of my classmates were majoring in engineering, and I didn't know what engineering was. So awareness of fields can really be a very powerful recruitment tool. Many special ed teachers can identify a person or an activity that they engaged in that allowed them or made them think about this as a field or a profession. So I've got a younger brother with a learning disability. That's what made me aware of the field and made me want to enter it. I can draw that straight connection. I worked with a lot of students who they were camp counselors in camps for students with pretty severe disabilities. And they said, that's exactly what I want to do. They may have had a volunteer opportunity, worked in Best Buddies or in Special Olympics. That meaningful engagement can really help students to consider this as a field in the future. And I include that exclusion, separation, integration, inclusion type of framework in here because I wonder in some of our schools where we aren't including students with a range of disabilities, to what extent are those connections and that awareness being built? And thinking about what are the opportunities in middle schools, elementary schools, high schools of inclusivity that could then lead to this of wanting to become a special ed teacher when you're 18, 19, 22. And are there ways that we could be doing that in much more targeted ways? I think it's one opportunity for us to really think about, I know I'm part of the Southern Tier teacher apprentice program. Now I can't think of what it's called, but as I was out at Chenango Forks today, talking with a group of high school students about research and their participation in this program. And, talking, they've been going out to classrooms in a variety of districts, and what a great opportunity for them to now be in classrooms and see what's it like in a rural school and an urban school. And they did go out to some of our more, to our BOCES settings and see what is it like in a separated special education school and classroom. And that meaningful engagement may be the thing that makes them think about special education when they might not have had that opportunity before. But how do we make some of these opportunities available to more students? During preparation, there's some really exciting and good news happening that I'm hoping that, my role at the university here and partnerships that I have with lots of our districts that we should be thinking about. And we are starting to grow, and we are starting to find ways to operate. There's a lot of really strong evidence that these grow your own, different from the high school grow your own ones that are in place, more thinking about the paraprofessionals and instructional aides and bus monitors, or the people who are already working in your district, getting them into teacher preparation. Those people that you're identifying who are really good with the kids, have a strong, connection to the community. Lots of evidence that those type of apprenticeships that the district and the university are working together to help to grow the teacher workforce, and finding targeted resources and opportunities to make that happen. It does seem to help with the diversity of the workforce, although I keep reminding some of my colleagues, but then how do we replace those folks? Because it's really hard to find good paraprofessionals, good bus monitors, good people working within our building. And so, there's some trickiness to that, but definitely opportunities as well. We also know that high quality, rigorous preparation really does matter for sustainability. There's lots of examples, more in other states than in New York. New York is pretty tight in higher preparation expectations, but there's opportunities in other states where you can real quickly move into a classroom. We're talking weekend workshops and you are now ready to go. Those programs seem to help create a real fast rotating door. So those preparation opportunities where we do a week-long boot camp, yes, they tend to help get more people in, but they also really help to force them out. So thinking about if we want to come up with alternative ways of entering teachers, we have to make sure that we maintain some of that rigor to our programs, and field placements. I know from the group that's here, we have some really great field placements in place across the region, and those really are important. We're finding that encouraging even our gen ed teachers to be in a special ed classroom for a placement, that will encourage them to think more about special ed certification and special ed teaching. And so that's something I'm working with my colleagues here that, yes, I know they want to be a math teacher, but maybe they should go to a different type of setting for a semester or a week or 2 weeks and think about what it's like to teach math in a 12-on-1 classroom or in a alternative type school. That those could really make it can influence career decisions down the road. The university supervisor is a really important lever, is my friend Hannah is really finding, more so even than the cooperating teacher, which I've heard, and this is one study, lots more to do, lots of questions to answer or ask. But the partnership and the way that the university supervisor can work with a class or a pre-service teacher can be super influential in the special ed teacher, this pre-service teacher making decisions later on, which could be important. We've often really tried, I'm going to try to say this in a very delicate way, especially since I'm being recorded. Sometimes we really try to make sure that placements are in classrooms with teachers that we know are super effective, and that's great. But maybe our students could also be in placements where the teacher needs some additional support. And they're in that classroom as a step up from an instructional aide because they're just about ready to move on to be their own classroom teacher, but maybe they're in there as a resource and the university supervisor is able to help them to understand and problem solve what they're seeing in the classroom. but some more work is absolutely needed and necessary, but really important things to be learned or that we are learning. The other interesting thing that I forgot to put a bullet on here. I think it's the next one. The students who are dual certified, doing their special ed preparation semester or placement last, seems to help them go and become special ed teachers next. There's some sort of thing happening. That's with Washington data. And so that's as we're thinking about the order of placements, that can be an important factor. School level considerations. Now thinking about, what you see within a school building, again, mentioned this at the beginning, the complexity of the special ed teacher's role. There's really strong evidence coming out about role ambiguity, burnout, issues of feeling not effective that are linked to teachers leaving the classroom. And so as you are an administrator or a colleague of a special ed teacher, or even a parent who you have a strong relationship with a special ed teacher, do keep in mind the complexity of the job can be a major challenge and a major source of stress. So are there ways to think about maybe simplifying? So instead of the teacher teaching all 4 content areas, can they focus on math and share that the other teachers are doing reading, social science? Are there ways, some of these classrooms having grades 1, 2, and 3, and having to teach content for grades 1, 2, and 3 can be a super challenge. And what does that mean? Really complex issues, and things though that with resources or with discussions, are there ways to problem solve? And similarly, like how do colleagues, both the gen ed teachers as well as administrators, how do they engage with special ed teachers in the building? Some of these microaggressions, I guess you would call them, of your students and the special ed teacher having to feel that can really be add to that burnout feeling, add to those feelings of stress. Trying to move away from some of that language around your students and my students, or it's always, the throwaway message of it's always your students in the office. Why are your students in trouble again? That separation of students with disabilities and their special ed teachers can be really a problem. Many special ed teachers, as well as OTs, PTs, find themselves without adequate classroom space and without access to classroom materials. I remember it was my 8th month of teaching when finally my administrator was like, do you have science textbooks for your class? Do you have the curriculum? And why are you teaching science to students? Why aren't you meeting with the science teachers? Trying to think about ways to allow the special ed teacher to see themselves as an instructional specialist as well. They are there to work and help students in a wide range of goals, but they need the time and space to also focus on instruction. And who are their allies within the building? Do they have allies? Do they have somebody that they're eating lunch with? Do they feel like they're invited to the party at the end of the year? The last one, my friend Laurent Scott and Christopher Cormier, they've been doing a lot on Black men in special ed roles, where oftentimes school colleagues, school administrators are assuming that those Black men want to be the disciplinarian in the building. Or assuming that they will be able to translate for families because of their Blackness. And that unnecessary or that assumption can serve as another microaggression and making a teacher feel that it just doesn't make them feel welcome, doesn't make them feel part of the team. This type of work, what my friends and I refer to as access to collective social assets. These social assets can really help. If I feel like I'm part of the building, if I feel like I'm part of the team, I'm more likely to want to be there. And so thinking about that in terms of how we're supporting our special ed workforce. Also thinking about how the role of the special ed teacher, being a new teacher potentially in the building, and now working with students who are maybe marginalized or minoritized within the building, that can lead to feelings of what we call intersectional professional vulnerability. That I'm the special ed teacher and they're my students. I now have the classroom that's down the hallway and under the stairs, or maybe it was a closet at one point. And you're sending me the students that nobody else wants to work with. That those feelings of being vulnerable are likely, they are related to decisions and wanting to leave school. And so how do we counter some of that narrative? Can be important. I love these, like what my friends think I do, what others like this. I really think for special ed teachers, like all the roles and the assumptions that of what we think that we're doing. If I could tell you one thing, I know it's, if you are an administrator in a school and you've never been a special ed teacher, try to shadow a special ed teacher. Try to see what it's like to be in one classroom for 15 minutes and then move to another building for 10 minutes and then try to collaborate with 7 different teachers throughout the day. These roles, these challenges that we're placing on special ed teachers, I think the burnout rate, the attrition rates, really demonstrating that this is part of the problem, and we need to think about how can we support teachers and potentially simplify the role to the extent that we can within context of all sorts of constraints. The other thing, a couple of my friends, they've been doing these kind of regular and consistent surveys and questionnaires of special ed teachers, and they have a new study that just came out, and they said that they found that what teachers are telling us in the fall, it tells you what you're going to see in the spring. So teachers who tell you they're already frustrated and they're already feeling a little like overwhelmed, it's only going to be worse by spring, and they're likely not going to come back. And so how can you gauge how your teachers feel early in the year and think about what are the ways that you can support them throughout the year so that they're more likely to come back? The interesting discussions I've had with teachers in the fall around trying to figure out their schedules, especially at the elementary level. I think this is definitely more when you're not as locked into period 1, period 2, period 3, although as somebody who is supposed to be in like 5 different classrooms at exactly the same time as a middle school teacher, could totally feel their pain. But the special ed teachers, as well as the literacy teachers to some extent, they think they have their day and their week all scheduled, and they have all the different service minutes all the way down. And then the 4th grade teacher says, I've decided I'm going to do math in the afternoon instead. These additional burdens can really be challenging and taxing for our teachers. And again, if we can think about how we can support them in the fall, whether it is we tell teachers, you got to figure this out within the first week, because there's other people who have to work on their schedule, to what extent can we help to influence some of these things? Like, how are you doing? Making sure there's a study, I forget who and when, but that special ed teachers who never saw their administrators never came in the door. The assumption that, well, if the classroom, if the door's shut, or if the students aren't in the main office, then I don't have to worry about them. But that, we are social beings. Make sure that we are talking and we are supporting and we are showing up in these classrooms. How are you doing? If they give you a problem that you don't know the answer to, helping them to figure out what's a solution. If you ask them, how are you doing? And this goes back to the study before the fall, winter, spring, you ask them what they're doing and they tell you that they're really overwhelmed, try to figure out a way that you can help them. Try to figure out, is it that the demands that you're asking them, are they too great? That they're supposed to be in a 1st grade room and the 6th grade room at exactly the same time? Are there ways that you can intervene and help them out? If they say that they don't know how to do IEPs, are there learning opportunities that you can present to them? They say they don't have science materials. Can you show them where the science materials are kept? You know, what other resources can you show them? And again, time after time, I'm speaking to special ed teachers who go, I don't know where they have the math manipulatives, and the math teacher won't show them to me or won't let me borrow them. You know, do the special ed teachers in your building or in your district have access to the same resources as other content teachers? Because they are teaching the content. Shifting to like more district level, you know, are there opportunities for thinking about special ed matching? So one of the interesting things about special education is that no two special ed teachers have the same role, right? There's between the variations in the students that we work with and students' needs, the ways that we configure the assignments, there's really a lot of variation in what the roles are. And so you could have two special ed teachers within your building who have two very different jobs. And so are there ways to think about how special ed teachers might support themselves across buildings? I do think I'm seeing more of that, you know, mentorship opportunities where we're pulling people together across buildings. And that's, I think, important for our novice special ed teachers as a way to keep them in, but also as we move forward, you know, throughout the opportunity, or I'm sorry, throughout your career. Also, are there ways to match my lips going on? Are there ways to match across districts potentially, especially in some of our smaller districts where there may be a very small handful of special ed teachers? Are there, like, thinking about the data that you have about the new teachers that you're hiring and thinking about the positions that you're placing in, are there ways to think about mapping backwards? Are they always filling in the same classroom role? So are you always hiring for 6th grade co-teaching? Are you always hiring for self-contained in 9th grade? If that's happening, then potentially thinking about what are the mentors and supports that are in place or not in place, and what are some other interventions that you might want to place around that role? Is the role too challenging? Are the people that they're supposed to be working with not seeing a collaboration there? Are there ways that you can help to foster collaboration? You know, that could possibly be a consideration more at the district level than within a school, although probably kind of above. And, you know, do you and do the people in the building or the district, do they understand some of the limitations of our evaluation systems? You know, it could be really stressful to get evaluations back where you're not getting scored as highly as you want to, but you know that what you're doing for kids is what is most important or most effective. And so recognizing some of the challenges of our evaluation system could be something to be reflective of. The other thing that was really coming out, and I'll share some more resources around this in a moment, the professional learning opportunities that we provide to our teachers. There's often a mismatch between what a special ed teacher feels that they need to learn more about and the professional learning opportunities that are available. And for lots of different reasons, right? We have curriculum, you know, whether we're going to focus on something that it's a curriculum that the special ed teachers aren't using, or, you know, it's just a mismatch, or they have pressing problems with a certain student with certain needs. And they could use that time differently. You know, are there opportunities to support the special ed teachers and helping them to find those professional learning opportunities that align well with their needs? Something that I'm seeing in a variety of states, you know, Indiana, Hawaii, Virginia, I forget, there was another state too. The Council for Exceptional Children is a special ed professional association, and those states are moving forward with getting professional memberships for all of their new teachers as a way for them to engage with others who are doing the same role, other special education teachers nationally. So, you know, are there ways to think about how we identify and provide opportunities that maybe within the district or within the region you don't have the capacity, but there may be ways to make those connections. Now, my friend in Hawaii, I keep telling her I'm going to come out and visit her and see more. She's doing like and it's all one district for the whole state, but she's been pulling the special ed teachers together. She has this grant and doing, 2-day long conferences with the special ed teachers and helping them not only focus on professional practice, but also working on things like stress and trying to get around some of the burnout issues that are often faced. Not sure how feasible that is in central New York. We don't have a lovely beach, but if they're able to fly, they have to helicopter their teachers together to the Big Island. So something to consider. And then, this idea of the special ed teacher, not only as a case manager and somebody who does paperwork, but also as an instructional planner. Does the special ed teacher have opportunities to learn about the content, to engage in the content, to get assistance with instructional planning and resources? Do they have time to do that? I think we sometimes forget that, many times a special ed teacher is teaching multiple content areas with a single prep time or maybe 2 prep times. But that prep time can be eaten up by wanting to make sure the student is doing okay in art class, wanting to make sure that parent gets called, being pulled into an IEP meeting. So are we protecting some of this planning time so that the special ed teacher can feel effective? So here are some of my free resources. If you're not familiar with the Iris Center, I highly encourage you to go on. It is free. It's been a center at Vanderbilt, the Peabody College at Vanderbilt for probably 20 years. They have a variety of these modules that teachers can complete. And so I put kind of a smattering. These are some of the newer ones about effective executive functions and UDL. Big things that are happening are being discussed, I believe, in schools. But they also have some about how do we do teacher induction for special ed teachers. They have 2 very specific modules that are focused on special ed teachers, a lot of which I brought into the discussion today or into my lecture. So providing these resources maybe to the other principals in your buildings or other district providers, as well as to maybe the math teacher who's in charge of all math instruction. Maybe they need to think about how they're a part of the training of new special ed teachers who are teaching math within your building. But also just the modules are great. Students who've ever been in my class, they do a lot of these modules. So if you have one of my alumni, they would know them well. But they're redoing them. There's a couple of new ones on classroom management. There's some on doing FBAs and data analysis. So some really great resources that I wanted to bring to everybody's attention. Also, the Office of Special Education Programs, beginning with Lori Vandeploeg, who was the director of OSEP about 5 or 6 years ago. They've really been working on this idea of attract, prepare, retain, and trying to cull resources together to help support the workforce. So that's me. Hold on. I meant to put more of these. I'm not going to get back to my thing. We put that in the chat box for you. On this page, that one's a little bit longer than the Iris module one. On this page, there are particular leverage briefs, kind of drawing attention to some of these things, 1-page or 2-page flyers about some of the issues that are facing the workforce that may be useful to share with others, as well as to review and to think about. They also have a long list of links to other federal centers and organizations that provide additional resources. And I wanted to bring attention to one in particular, the Center on Great Teachers and Leaders. If you haven't seen their resources, very much focused on things like coaching, instructional coaching and administrator leadership. Lots of great toolkits that can help with discussion. They have one in particular that I've been trying to get myself to use and to work with collaborators on, and then never get the grant dollars, and then things like COVID happen. But this one on educator shortages in special education, they have a data tool that's available. So it's a long workbook that includes directions on how to complete this Excel file. And it allows you to think about, okay, how many people are coming into the workforce? So it'd be something that, you know, I could collaborate with you thinking about our national, or I'm sorry, our statewide data on education degree conferred and how many are passing licensure. And then, but how many are actually submitting applications to your district? And of those that are submitting applications, how many are actually coming in for interviews and how many are selected? And trying to identify where is the gap, where between special ed teachers that we need and developing the workforce and where is this disconnect? You know, is it that we're not getting enough people applying and we need to think about our recruitment efforts? Or is it that they're leaving at 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years? You know, is it a retention issue? And so within this toolkit, you know, not only can you display the information that you have in your district, but there's also, you know, pieces that allow you to have discussions of, okay, if it's a retention problem, what are some of the things that I might have at my disposal? What are some of the things that perhaps what are some of the levers I might have, or who do I need to work with on rethinking the roles and the responsibilities that we're asking of our special ed teachers? And so, you know, I find this tool to be really interesting and useful and would love to work with somebody to see how it could be implemented. But those are my slides. Now I'd love to hear, like, are there questions? I don't know if we have much time. Are there things that you're doing? You know, feel free to, you know, either raise your hand or put in the chat box. Are there things that you are doing that maybe I didn't mention that have been really effective? Are there other challenges that I may know something about? Everybody.
If anyone wants to unmute, you should be able to ask your question, or if you prefer to type it in the chat, that's fine too. We did have one comment that said, can we advocate for some entity to grant CTLEs for teachers who take these modules? Maybe the colleges or BOCES can grant the CTLEs.
Absolutely, that is a good idea. And I know, so within the IRIS modules, there is a what do they call it? They were, during COVID, it was free that you could get these certificates. And definitely I should bring that to some of the people I know at the local BOCES, because I just don't, like, I would work with them because I don't know how to put it on the fancy, like, dashboards and things like that. But I would imagine that could be something doable. I will bring that to Carrie.
So I would say, I think we're lucky in our district to have some really cool supports. We're at Union Endicott. I just realized that's not connected to my name, but we have an in-house teacher center. We have a mentoring program. I think one of the things we've kind of found, and you know, a phrase that sticks with me is one of my special education teachers at the elementary level frequently says, like, we're special education and we are special. So they do want some differentiated trainings and opportunities. So I think finding that balance and that time, because like you're saying, we want them to connect with classroom teachers, with curriculum, with academics, but then we also want them to have that opportunity to connect with their peers around high leverage practices and what are you doing in your building, in your co-taught classroom. So finding that time so they have access to both is really a challenge, and everybody's individual. So some people value one more than the other. So I think it's just kind of a balancing act and trying to listen and meet the unique needs of each person so they feel heard and feel supported. So I think that's like kind of time is always a challenge, I think, in education.
Absolutely. Time, resources, all of these, but 100%. Sometimes the special ed teacher is going to want to be part of the group because they want to be part of the team, but sometimes they are going to need individualized instruction. And I think that's all teachers do, but absolutely try to figure out what the balance is, and try to figure out ways to make that heard. Nancy, I see your comment in the chat about early intervention. Yeah, I think the CTLEs around for early intervention providers, as well as I'm hearing social workers, speech language pathologists, they also like trying to find and connect CTLEs to free opportunities or opportunities that are low cost can be really important, as they don't have the same resources as a district. And so 100%, how can we advocate for them to have, be able to put these opportunities into play? Then one last thing, as I know, I think we're almost at the end of time. Carrie mentioned high leverage practices, and if you haven't seen, they do have a new high leverage practice book out and a new organization of the high leverage practices in special education. That you can get the download for free. And if you email me, which I should have put my email on here, I am happy to forward that link to people. It's very similar to the high leverage practices that were rolled out a couple of years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, but they have done some restructuring and the book is free. And some new resources are coming out as well. Happy to do that plug for my colleagues and friends, part of that project.
Any last minute questions? If anyone has any more, please don't hesitate to ask. This has been a really worthwhile topic and definitely well received, I'm sure.
Right, definitely, as people start to leave, I feel free to reach out to me anytime about anything you're considering or thinking, or if there, if you want, I don't know, if you want anything, I am happy to be a support and to work collaboratively.